Hey everyone, this is Jamie Durgan with 5S. We're going to be starting this in about 3 minutes. We still have some folks that need to connect in, so just a little bit of patience. We'll be with you in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just to get going. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our August webinar. This is XenApp migration to XenApp XenDesktop 7.x. My name is Jamie Durgan. I am the VP of Engineering for 5S Technologies. Before we go too far into the technology, I wanted to just kind of do a brief introduction of 5S Technologies for those that are new to the call, and who we are, what we stand for, and kind of what we're going to be going over today. So real quickly, just an idea of like, who 5S is and why people would choose 5S. I think what you'll see is our engineers, our experience. We have senior engineers all with at least 20 years of experience within our different services and focuses. One of our focuses is obviously around virtual desktop and VDI, and we have over 20 years of experience in that area. Been really around since the inception of the technology, and we sort of go by a 5S code, and that is we implement things the same, we operate things the same, we all kind of work by the same methods and processes. We choose top vendors. We work with companies like Citrix, and this is a really prime example of that. We're partnering with Citrix to deliver the right customers, and we choose Citrix because they are leaders in their area and visionaries, and continue to strive for the best possible solution that drives the right outcomes for their customers, and that's what we want to. Jonathan, you can move to the next slide. So where can we help? Where does 5S kind of fit in? Like I mentioned, we can do the upgrades and that are described today in our handle day operations for many different customers, many different industries. And we can both do the day-to-day ticket handling all the way up to escalation for that engineering and architecture. We handle all types of virtualization, so not just VDI, but that virtual data center environment, the cloud computing, we can handle it all. And from an infrastructure perspective, we have focuses obviously in the realm, as well as storage, the mentality of consolidation, of making that data center footprint smaller and smaller as your environment becomes an increasing demand. You can move to the next slide. So we follow the plan, build, run mentality, right? And this is probably the easiest way for us to discuss like how we do the work that we do. So we have, from the plan side, everything is project based. It's going to be in architecture and design. We do project management. We have the oversight of projects that we partner with our customers. We do health assessments, and we do deployments and implementations based all on, proven best practices. We help with the build. That's the sort of the ongoing operations, the run, right? We will work with you on doing prepackaged services of like health assessments, architecture assessments. We handle operations management evaluations. In other words, how good are things running? How do we continue to meet the needs of the increased demand of our customer base? Not just you being IT for your business, but us being stewards of your IT department. And how do we make that run as easy and as simplified as possible? That's really where we come in and help drive that challenge of how do we meet the day-to-day demands of our customers. And Jonathan, you can go to the next slide. So as an example, what does VDI look like from 5S? So we constantly review newly developed and enhanced technologies. We're focused on the right architecture and design, certified with all of the different technologies that are out there. Obviously, Citrix is included in that, in order to come up with the best possible design for your company. We use third-party software to gain insight into your current solution. We're not doing it manually. We choose the right third-party software that works with the Citrix technologies in order for us to understand the right capacity planning, the right assessing. It's not all done manually. We've got the right tools to drive the information that helps us make that decision making with our customers. And we apply all of the years of experience that we have in designing, deploying, and maintaining these environments into our efforts. So it's not just each new environment and is a new solution. We take our knowledge and experience from across our teams and apply it to the best, to create our own best practices that help us, come up with the best design criterias, and we streamline those processes. And it means optimal performance of the environment, of our resources, and the deployment of your new architecture. So that's a quick view of 5S. I just wanted to give everybody sort of the quick synopsis. For those that don't know who 5S is, I'm happy to talk to you a little bit more about the services that we provide. But today we will be talking about the migration methods to and enhancements to the new 7.x versions of Citrix, why you would want to migrate, why you would consider a cloud deployment, the licensing impacts and changes to licensing, and what all this really looks in the real world. So today's speaker is Jonathan Freeman. He's a 4-year veteran of Citrix in the position of lead channel architect, and he's focused on virtualized apps and desktop solutions. Jonathan's focus has been in end-user computing for over 10 years, and he brings a great combination of vendor-based and industry-based knowledge that he'll use to describe to us the changes and related impacts. So Jonathan, take it away, my man.
Great, thank you so much, Jamie. So that's a perfect introduction into what we're going to cover today on the webinar. And really, getting from the XenApp 6.5 or even maybe possibly older versions to on the, not necessarily the current release, but at least to hopefully a 7.6. So that's why we have the 7.xx there. And I put Cloud 2 on here because some of our newest products, and even in the current releases, the latest releases of those are going to be done in our kind of Citrix as a service model as we have moving forward. So we'll transition to talk a little bit about the Citrix Cloud services. But first, we're going to talk about reasons to migrate. I know that our 6.5 version of XenApp was a really rock solid version that worked for many, many years. And we have a lot of customers that are still running it, even with extended support. But the end of lifetime has come for 6.5. So even though hopefully everyone has the extended support and maintenance, so that way you can take your time with the new deployments of the 7.x models, but there are other things that also we need to catch up on. I know within the infrastructure, such as Windows 10 support, or the possibility of moving some workloads out to public clouds, or even taking SaaS apps that are out there and maybe integrating them to the app delivery methods that you have, so that your end users can consume it all in a clean method. So there's some other additional benefits that you really get out of moving to the newest versions as well. Some of this is based around security. We've got advanced analytics built into the cloud platforms now, which I'll touch a little bit on. But really, when we talk about improved image management, it's a lot easier to manage one master server images in the newer versions, and provisioning is a lot more efficient as well. So if you have an on-demand increase to capacity, bringing on a bulk of new users at one time, so it's much easier to add those in the machine catalogs for the newer versions here. And just the overall end user experience is optimized with the newer technologies that are out there. So, and the users instantly realize that the enhanced visual quality that they see on their end and performance from the applications and desktops, including 2D and 3D graphics rendering, is going to be a lot better than what they previously had. And the simplified management and troubleshooting tools as well. We've got Studio and Director for the management, and then the help desk thereafter that you can do across multiple resource locations now through a single pane of glass. And with the newer versions, I mentioned the cloud piece only, we have advanced analytics for security, performance, and user experience that you can pull data on through anything that's going through any of the Citrix components. And I'm not going to go too deep into the analytics piece today, because you could spend a whole 45 minutes to an hour just looking at that by itself. But I encourage you to take a look at that. We've got webinars coming up on the Citrix side that will be specific to just the analytics piece. So when we start talking about how we get the migration going, one of the first reasons you want to be able to ask yourself, or first questions, is your subscription advantage current? Because the licensing has to be there to be able to move forward. And I hope so, and if it is, take advantage of it before it's too late. Because we don't want your licensing to lapse, because that's just going to cost more money where it doesn't necessarily have to. So when you purchase a new Citrix product, you get that for at least a year, and it entitles you to, among other benefits, any product updates, including all major and minor releases released during your membership period. So we want to take advantage of that and be able to move up and onto the latest versions, or the version that's right for you. Now, if there's any interest in moving to the cloud, we want to talk about that too, because then this Citrix as a service is a much easier way to move to new versions of XenApp and XenDesktop from an older architecture, because it is an architecture change from 6.5 to the 7.x versions. And so we can, for the licensing rights, we can transition, so just move from a version of perpetual software that you have to the equivalent of the cloud service. Or we can trade up if you want more cloud services than what you are currently consuming as an on-premise service. We can do a trade-up program as well. But to ease the transition totally, we've got hybrid rights that are tied to this as well. So the ability to be licensed and supported for your traditional perpetual software and cloud services at the same time. Now, this requires a 3-year subscription, and for 24 months out of those 3 years, you get hybrid rights to be able to complete your migration. And of course, the rights to the support, the cloud services, continues until the end of that 3-year term. So it really gives you a lot of time to get a phased approach to move and possibly even free up infrastructure resources from what you have in your Citrix infrastructure. Now, we'll take a look at what the architecture looks like here in a few slides. But that's cool and all, but what are we actually offering now? As far as the licensing for on-premise products, we've got XenApp and XenDesktop. We're actually in the process of changing names again, which if you've known Citrix for a while, you've known it's something that we tend to do slightly often. But the products features and functions are the same as they were before. They're just going to be Citrix virtual apps and Citrix virtual desktops. We've got suites and bundles that often the on-premise concurrent users for this, and user device licensing at the same time for XenApp Zen Desktop, Zen Mobile Service for endpoint management and mobile application management, and ShareFile as well for data management. And if you haven't taken a look at ShareFile and you've got a data problem or you want a better way for users to consume OneDrive for business or other network file shares in a streamlined manner or possibly even in a published desktop, ShareFile is a very, very slick way to do that. So like I said, today we're not talking about ShareFile, but that's just something I really encourage you taking a look at, because if we get into these suites and bundles, there's a big cost savings for your company there as well if you're packaging these services together. As you can see, especially with the cloud service, where you don't have to manage the control planes, so you get all of these services wrapped together for $500 per user per year. And I believe everyone's getting a copy of this deck as well. So if you're wondering just about the feature matrix and what you get with all of these particular products, we've got this included in here for your reference. You can also find them on citrix.com. All right, so now that the licensing information is out of the way, I kind of want to get into the fun stuff, which is, how do we get from XenApp 6.5 to a 7.x version of XenApp Zen Desktop? And from there, even then, we'll take a more broad look at how do we get from on-prem to possibility of moving things into the cloud. And we'll look at that cloud as kind of two different angles, and you'll understand what I mean when we get down there. But first, let's talk about that 6.5 to 7.x. And really what we need to do, there's 4 steps that we need to consider for planning for the future of this. The most important step in preparing for a 6.5 end-of-life event and upgrading to 7.x is planning, in my opinion. So XenApp 7.x, we introduced a new, what we call the FlexCast Management Architecture, or FMA, which changed the architecture of the Citrix delivery infrastructure, which is a big roadblock for a lot of companies to upgrade, because a rip and replace is not an easy project to take on. But this really does allow us to have more flexibility in what we're deploying. We have a singular DDC, as you'll see, but not only can we deliver just Windows applications, but we can also now do Linux operating systems as well. But along with this, there's also new concepts, terminology, and more functionality. So I encourage you to get up to speed, which is kind of what we're doing today on the new architecture, and all the security, user experience, and management benefits that come along with it. So if new skills and services, with the help of 5S, you can help build out your XenApp 7.x environment. So we want to consider selecting what server operating system of choice is going to be. Leverage the easy to use install wizards that we provide to guide you through the install process. Take a tour of the new consolidated management and monitoring consoles that we have in Studio and Director. Publish some virtual apps and desktops within the architecture and see how it's optimized for the admin side before we dole it out. And then we want to integrate these environments together. Storefront is probably going to be the most powerful migration tool for a 6.5 to 7.x environment, which I know that's not what Storefront's main function is, but one of the things it can do is an aggregation of sites from the old versions to the new versions. So that means you can have a XenApp 7.x environment living side by side with your existing XenApp environment, enabling you to complete the upgrade process essentially at your own pace. So this allows users to still have that personalized self-service access to all their business apps, making it easy for them to transition between the existing and the new environments as well. And then finally, when you're ready to migrate all of your apps to the newest versions, we have tools that help you get over the finish line. So if your apps need to stay on server 2008 R2, the XenApp 7.x install wizard will actually just simply uninstall 6.5 on those app servers and install XenApp 7.6 for an easy migration. So, but if you're moving your apps to a new operating system, like 2012 R2, 2016, or we have even the latest versions on the horizon, which we'll have day one support for, we provide tools like AppDNA, and it's an analysis tool that you can run on that particular OS with the apps on it. So it'll automatically assess the compatibility, and it will give provided remediation guidance on that as well. And of course, we have powerful migration tools that intelligently export your existing virtual app policies and settings into 7.x configurations where that's applicable as well. So what does this actually look like? So this is the FMA or FlexCast management architecture. And it does not look the same as a 6.5 environment there. We've broken it down into the 5-layer model is what we call it internally, considering the users for their devices and how they access things. And that's going to be the Citrix receiver, just like it's always been. Well, I mean, it was other things before it was receiver, but it's been receiver for quite some time. We've actually just changed the end user app a little bit. And I'm going to show you a quick demo later on what that looks like. It's going to be the workspace app, which is the replacement for receiver, which it is receiver with some additional engines built into it. And then the access layer. So this is where NetScaler comes into play, where our NetScaler or Citrix ADC is going to handle all of the identity, authentication, even load balancing, if necessary, into the environment in conjunction with Storefront to be able to give access to the resource column what we had back there. And the big change is under the control column, where we have the XenApp and XenDesktop controller. So we only need to have a singular DDC to be able to manage Windows apps, Linux apps, and pooled or dedicated Windows desktops all at the same time. And the other control plane components that are part of that are Studio for the management of it. We still have a license server to check in, check out licenses. And we've got Director as your help desk console. And all this still needs SQL to be able to operate as well. Now, when it comes to the host layer, we're still very agnostic when it comes to what you can run these resources on. Of course, we have Xen Server. You get Xen Server entitlements when you purchase XenApp and XenDesktop or the Virtual Apps and Desktop service. So you can use that free hypervisor from us if you want. If you want something that's a bit more enterprise grade, you can jump up to Nutanix AHV or Acropolis. You can run this on physical servers if you want. Don't see much of that anymore. Hyper-V and vSphere are what we see in the enterprise space for most of the deployments that are on Citrix. So Jamie, I'm just going to check the question box here. Nothing in there that I see just yet.
No, I think we're still clear. Yep.
Great.
But if there's any questions, folks, please.
Yeah, these versions have been around for a little while.
Go ahead and use the webinar tool, and we'll.
All right, we'll jump into a little bit about modernizing the app deployments. So if there's an interest, which I think that there is for most companies, to utilize the cloud in some way, moving from a XenApp 6.5 environment to using some of our Citrix cloud services, it makes the deployments much easier. And it helps speed up the timeline just a little bit as well. Now, in a traditional Citrix deployment, XenApp and XenDesktop, so we see these number of servers and services that are required to be installed that we talked about, which we have the NetScaler, the Storefront, Director, Studio, the DDC, the license server, and the database. So the entire system is given access to Active Directory, so that desktops and apps can be securely assigned to the correct employees. But overall, we understand that this is a complex configuration and it needs to be sized, configured, tuned properly to ensure that the end users get the best experience while optimizing for infrastructure costs at the same time. And then when we consider things like patching and upgrading, it can sometimes further complicate those administrative tasks, which is where I think hopefully everyone can help lean on 5S or Citrix to help out with that. But we do want to make things a little bit easier. So when we talk about Citrix Cloud, it's not desktops as a service or DaaS. What it is it's Citrix as a service, kind of as a SaaS operated model, where we take those complicated pieces that are installed in that control plane and we just move them into a cloud tenant. So that way they're managed, installed by us, and everything is accessed by you as a customer. So this is good on several fronts because you don't have to worry about what version it is. It's always going to be on the latest version. You don't have to worry about what updates are going out to it. It's completely monitored by us. So that way, it leaves you as the administrator only concerned with the VDAs or virtual delivery agents that you have installed on your apps and desktops that you're doling out for your Citrix infrastructure, and any of the data that backs those at the same time. Now, as you notice, we've actually pulled SQL out up into here. So that's one thing you don't have to worry about having a SQL database tied to. Now, one piece of the migration could simply just be offloading that management infrastructure. And the second piece that we'll talk about is this bottom half, because some of these workloads can move to the cloud if you'd like them to. Studio and Director, of course, will move up there as well. So you get access to all the management consoles that are operating just as they were on-prem. But really, there's one piece that we had to add to the architecture to make this work, and that is the cloud connector. So in every resource location, that bottom piece that contains your workloads, you're going to need cloud connectors in order to connect them up to the cloud service. And so they've got the requirements, some of them listed there for the cloud connector, but it needs to be installed on a domain joined Windows machine. We support Windows Server 2012 R2 and up. And then all the traffic from that machine is outbound. So it does not need to be in a DMZ. And we actually don't recommend giving it a public IP. So it could be behind a NAT or HTTP proxy, because all the traffic from it's outbound from the connector to our cloud service. And if you like, we even offer in our documentation a whitelist of URLs if needed. So that way, if you choose to have the HTTP proxy that filters the traffic, you can just whitelist just the specific URLs that the cloud connector needs. And the other piece of it is that the cloud connector software itself auto updates. So from the cloud control plane, we're able to manage updates to it. We regularly push fixes, features, all it's completely taken care of by the cloud service. And because we do patch it, we always recommend that the connectors are deployed in pairs. So we only update one at a time. So that way, in the instance that one of them goes down, you still have the connection to the cloud service. Now, the placement of the storefront and the NetScaler are something we need to consider. So when you buy a cloud service, it comes in the cloud service. You get it right there. It's just baked in. There's nothing you have to do. This is where you start off. But we want to be able to give choice to you as the customer to be able to put that where you need to. In a lot of cases, putting those next to the workloads actually makes a lot of sense. But we also want to give you the option to be able to mix and match. So if you have a NetScaler that you're using for something else and you want to be able to utilize that for the connection, but you want to put storefront service in the cloud, you're allowed to do that. So we are here to provide guidance for you about what is possible around these different choices and really where you should use one solution over the other. Now, this cloud connector, I wanted to go into a little bit about what it is, because there's always some questions about how it works. What are the services that it utilizes? But essentially, if you were to open up a cloud connector, log into it, go to those services, you'll see it's not just a simple Windows service. It's actually a collection of services. And each of these services, and I'm only going to point out the XenApp as the desktop ones here, but there are also services on a connector for Xen Mobile, ShareFile, and some other products. But basically, from a Xen desktop or XenApp standpoint, you'll see that it has proxies for protocols like the style protocol that NetScaler uses to authorize connections into your network. And it supports the Citrix brokering protocol, which is what the VDAs use to communicate with the broker. And it also has some APIs that can talk to all of your on-premises hypervisors. We support vSpheres and Server Hyper-V, HV, those ones that we had mentioned earlier. So all of these will actually proxy down from your cloud service to the connector, and then it can talk to your on-premises hypervisors via the connector. But last but not least, identity is also very important. So the connector has to be a domain joined machine, And the identity service is going to use the machine credentials of the connector when you're browsing AD. So that's how it finds the machine accounts and the user accounts. It can look at what OUs you have for publishing remote PCs. All of these sort of operations are proxied down to the identity service on the connector. So now, if you choose to use the NetScaler gateway service, it's going to be proxied out through the connector. It comes with a XenApp and XenDesktop service I mentioned. So you get 1 GB of traffic included for every user that you purchase, and that's per month, and it's all pooled together. So you can use it however you like. You don't have to let every user use the service. You can have certain resource locations using the gateway service and pool the data for those users. But in that case, what will happen is the traffic gets tunneled from the NetScaler in the cloud to the cloud connector, and then from the cloud connector to the VDA. But going forward, we have an update that's going to short circuit that traffic, and it's going to be able to go directly from the VDA up to the NetScaler in the cloud. So I've used this term resource location a few times. Thought it would be important to define, what that is, because that's the piece that we're not managing, but we're leaving for you to manage. So it's a box right there that you see on the screen that contains the workloads themselves. And we recommend at least a minimum of 2 cloud connectors, like I mentioned before, in each resource location. But what's great about this is that you can mix and match. So just because you choose to put some workloads up in a public cloud, if you want to do so, or in AWS or Azure, you can also have a resource location for each of your on-premises data centers and leave workloads there too. We've seen customers that have multiple data centers really take advantage of this, because you can drop a cloud connector in each one of those. And instead of having managed those sites independently, you can manage all of those sites via one pane of glass through the cloud console. And during a migration, this is going to be a really important piece, because it allows us to do a phased migration from on-premises to the cloud if you want to do so. So we don't have to do everything over the weekend. You don't have to shut it all down. We can piece it out and gradually migrate one workload at a time. So you'll also notice that in this scenario, there's a VPN between the resource locations, and there's no Citrix traffic flowing over that VPN. So all the connectivity occurs between the cloud connectors out to the internet, and between components like the VDA and hypervisors stays within one resource location. So typically we see the need to set up a VPN or express route or some sort of SD-WAN IPsec connection between different resource locations for things like Active Directory. Or if you have virtual desktops that are running in cloud that need to get back to web servers, file shares, that sort of thing on premises, they need to have a connectivity to be able to make that happen. So all this is neat. I mentioned that I would eventually get to how you go from a 6.5 environment to cloud. Now, I'm going to also kind of talk a little bit about on-prem as well in this scenario, even though the slide's built out for the cloud. But this is your typical 6.5 environment. Right? You've got some 6.5 controllers. You have some 6.5 workers. We've got NetScaler, storefront in this scenario. Everything is on premises. So the very first step to migrate is to stand up a 7.x environment, as we had mentioned. You have to build that, or you subscribe to a Citrix workspace, the virtual apps and desktops. And what this does is we take 24 hours and provision the Citrix infrastructure for you. And then you simply just log into what will be your customized URL, so your customer at citruscloud.com, and you'll be able to access and manage everything from there. So the second step, if you're moving in this direction, is to install those cloud connectors. So these connectors will be able to talk to Active Directory. They'll also reach outbound to the cloud service, and that's the first step that links your AD up to your account in the cloud. So, and next, we're not going to move to the workspace yet. We're going to do just the bare minimum. So we'll point our storefront and add a second XenDesktop site. And when you go to configure the XML servers for that XenDesktop site, you point them to the address of your cloud connectors. And what this is going to do is allow any applications that you publish with the cloud service to appear in your existing storefront site. So what's also great is you have the same applications published. It will show up as the same to your users. They won't even see anything as you're doing this transition, allowing you to phase it over time. So that way, once again, it doesn't have to be a rush project over the weekend and doesn't have to be necessarily completed in one day with any downtime. So now in phases, you can convert your 6.5 images to virtual delivery agents running at least, a 7.15 or later. 7.15 does support Windows Server 2008 R2 as a platform. So if you have some 6.5 images that you just want to convert without rebuilding them, you just uninstall it and then install the VDA, which is our long-term service release version of 7.15. Using the cloud service, you can manage those. And one thing I'll point out that is a key piece to make sure you do before you decommission your 6.5 farm is update the STA, both in the NetScaler and at the storefront, to point to the cloud connectors and not the 6.5 controllers that you're about to decommission, because that will definitely take down your entire site. So you want to change those STA addresses first. The cloud connector has an STA. It works great. So now you can actually decommission your 6.5 infrastructure after you do that. And now you're on to 7.15 is a long-term service release version, which is designed for you to have it stood up for 10 years without having to upgrade again if you want to go down that move. Or if you want to move to the latest current release, you can do that as well. Some folks like to have those latest features and don't mind doing the updates if they don't have too much of a complicated environment. So the scenario where we're actually going to take your on-premises environment and move everything up to the cloud. So if we get rid of all the in-premises infrastructure, the workloads and the actual brokering infrastructure, we move it all up to the public cloud. First, we need to set up that workspace again. And then this feature we talked about earlier, we can aggregate it. So we have the cloud connectors going up. We set up 2 cloud connectors on premises, similar to what we did before. Now, one thing that's important is you'll need to run an HTTP redirect from your old URL to your new customer.cloud.com URL for the workspace. And so if you don't try and use the same one, if you do that, we can actually run into certificate issues because we don't have the matching certificate on the multi-tenant workspace. So you need to use that HTTP redirect, but you can do this with NetScaler if you want to. So it has the feature where you can just set up a redirect on that old URL for the users, and if they go to the old one, they'll just get redirected up to the Citrix workspace. So when you talk about actually reducing that infrastructure in your own data centers, you can move the DDCs up to the cloud. To do this, we just copy our configuration, and then in the VDAs, the list of the DDCs, we change that list, the addresses to the cloud connector, and it'll be able to broker that up. The VDA, you don't even have to update the image itself. You just change the DDC via policies. And at this point, you could consider decommissioning the NetScalers if you want to move to a NetScaler gateway service. That's optional, of course. This is just a good time to do that. So you would sign up with your own subscription to any of these public clouds, so AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or any other. And then next, you provision your network connectivity, which is that express route or SD-WAN that you have connected into. So you want to connect your Active Directory up to that using any of the options that we've described, whether it's a one-way trust or another AD site that you stand up out there. And then we put 2 cloud connectors in your cloud region. So now you can actually take the VDAs and recreate them in the cloud. And at this point, once everything is moved, you can decommission the cloud connectors that you have on-prem, and everything in this manner is then moved out of your infrastructure except for the Active Directory connection that it needs. So this is how you can move all of your workloads up to the cloud vendor of your choice if you so choose. So there's a variety of things that need to be considered before or during the migration as well when talking about the resource layers. So we have to find the right instance type for the virtual app and desktop workloads. So hereby, we have to consider cost per user versus manageability versus scaling and the size of the failure domain. So we have a lot of good information and data points around sizing for this as well, but they are ever changing. So it's good to get with your Citrix SE, or look at some of the latest documentation we have in the VDI handbook that will cover this, or work with 5S and they'll work with us as well. So next, you have to consider the apps that the users will access and have a detailed understanding of the app backends. And if there's no backend system like a database or file share, then the app is probably a great candidate for a cloud migration. But if there is a backend which is sensitive to latency, it requires a lot of network communication, the app might not be the best candidate. So for most apps, we'll have a backend, and therefore we need to implement a network path for backhaul communication, such as a site-to-site VPN between the cloud and the on-prem data center, or something like an express route. So, and finally, we need to find a strategy for the user authentication and identity methods. We have options that range from fully cloud-based AD services via ADFS to considering the cloud just as another branch and putting a domain controller out there with normal AD replication. So we have options there. All right, and then one of the biggest recent changes we had, actually, I mentioned this at the very beginning, was around this user in-device box, because we have a replacement for receiver that is out there. And well, as IT folks, we want to have control and policies in place. Ultimately, what makes our lives easier is if the end users have seamless experience and don't need to open help desk tickets all the time if they need to. So the Workspace app, also known as receiver, it's the receiver guts with a few new engines built on top of it. And as you can see under the home tab here, we've got apps with favorites. You can add favorites in here. You have desktops, files as well. So if you have a share file service, all of the recent files will actually show up in there. And I was hoping to demo this, but my demo environment that I have on that's connected to Workspace, the file piece actually broke on me. So I have to show you the still screen on this one. And what's nice about this too is you can actually fully customize this with your own logos. It doesn't have to say Citrix Workspace. That way, users won't necessarily blame everything on Citrix being broken if they have a connection that's not working properly. But you can put your company's logo up here. You can change the color of this, and it will say your company Workspace, or just your company up here. This Acme Systems is the fake company that we have on here. But it's very easy to get there. If anyone's running, we actually have an auto update feature for receiver, and it will not auto update to this right now. So you can update it manually by upgrading your firmware on the thin clients, deploy it via XenMobile, or you can flip on the auto update, and eventually your users will get it. You can also, there's options that we know to reconfigure receiver by using the thin client management consoles, just by pushing them out via policies, once again, using XenMobile, or you can actually do a NetScaler URL rewrite to redirect users back into the cloud service as well. So I know jumping from one architecture to the next is a big change, and being able to take advantage of the latest and greatest that's out there is cool, but we understand that there's stuff that is good and bad about moving to a new user interface, and that's why I've got some of these are half red, half green, because it's something we want to be able to consider. So obviously the Workspace app comes with a new and shiny UI. And we understand that there are users that won't like it because it looks different. But at the same time, it's really cool and really slick. If you have a traditional storefront environment, there's going to be no changes to that. It looks just traditional as we know it. And actually, if you don't have this link to a cloud service or a site aggregation service, even if you update the application with the traditional storefront in place, it will look exactly the same as it did before. So Workspace gives us access to any resource, including SaaS apps. We can aggregate everything right in that one singular console. And if anybody wants to see a demo of how this works, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and I'd be happy to walk you through it. Storefront is limited to HDX apps only, so if you want to include SaaS apps, they're going to have to be published via a browser to be able to get them through Storefront. So it's a one-trick pony in that sense. With Workspace, we consider that it's has a lot of things and a lot of moving parts, and it's great. It's got integrated management, so it's managed from within the cloud plane where you manage everything else if you choose to go down that path. It's really simple to do that. Storefront, on the other hand, has a separate management console, which provides more flexibility with it, but it can also come with higher complexity. So you get basic customizations, like I mentioned. You get more extensive customizations on a storefront. The big kicker is the authentication piece. So the Workspace app right now has basic auth options. We're working to really get those extended, and it will be very soon. And in Storefront, of course, you have extensive authentication methods that are in there. One of the big downsides too, if you're a big PowerShell user, there's no PowerShell interface in a Workspace. And if you like being able to use scripting methods for Storefront, you can continue to do that with Storefront. And then Workspace, of course, because it is the newest, latest, and greatest, has integrations with the NetScaler Gateway as a service and on-prem NetScaler Gateway. Now, you look at the traditional storefront deployments, it's not going to have integration with on-prem NetScaler Gateway. Or, sorry, integration with on-prem NetScaler Gateway is the only method that it can use, which honestly is something that we see happen more often. The storefront and the NetScaler next to the resource locations is still a very common way to do these deployments. So with that, if there's any questions in the box, that is all of the content that I had for today. So I appreciate being able to grab your attention for the time this morning, and I hope this was very helpful, at least sparks a little bit of interest about, or alleviate some fears about moving to the newer versions of what Citrix has to offer.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Again, everyone, this is Jamie Durgan with 5S. I just wanted to see if there was any questions out there. We can either use the questions tab on the GoToWebinar, or if you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to unmute you if you want to ask a question directly to Jonathan. Jonathan, I thought the content was great and a great overview of the changes that are coming.
Great, yeah, and we're trying to make things as easy as possible, and hopefully be able to help you work with these guys to be able to ease the transition at the same time.
Okay, everyone, I don't see any immediate questions. If there are any questions after, please feel free to reach out to me or to Jonathan. I think you'll have everybody's contact information. We'll send out some follow-up emails for those that have attended, including a link to to this webinar and the video that we've recorded. I do appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to September. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jamie. Appreciate it.
All righty. Thanks, everybody.